This video was made possible by CuriosityStream. When you sign up at the link in the description, you'll also get access to Nebula, the streaming video platform that RealLifeLore is a part of. For over 100 years now, Japan has been one of the world's most powerful civilizations. Her impact on culture, technology, and society has been among the greatest in history. But all of this is despite her civilization's spawn point being not necessarily the greatest. The core of Japanese civilization has always been based around the Japanese archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. Japan has always been an island civilization, and modern-day Japan consists of 6,852 different islands, although there's really only 4 important ones that you need to know about: Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. All of these islands combined give Japan a land area that's roughly equivalent to the US state of California, but it's a lot more spread out than that. If you place Japan off the east coast of the United States, the southernmost islands would be south of Miami, while the northernmost would be above Halifax. And unlike California, Japan has a population of nearly 127 million people, more than 3 times the population in California. However, most of this population is concentrated into just a few small areas on the island of Honshu, and a topographic map helps to explain why. This is Japan's first major geographic weakness. The home islands are absolutely covered with mountains. 73% of Japan's total land area, in fact, is mountainous, which means that most of Japan's land is incredibly difficult and expensive to develop for human habitation. With only 27% of her land not being covered by mountains, it means that despite being much larger in overall territory, Japan has about the same amount of livable and workable land that South Korea has. Most of the Japanese population is, therefore, crowded and stuffed into highly concentrated, dense urban areas across the scattered plains in between the mountains, like the Nobi Plain, home to 7 million, or the Osaka Plain, home to over 19 million. Japanese civilization historically was based around the Osaka Plain, with the capital in Kyoto, before it was moved to the larger, more strategic, and more productive Kanto Plain in the 17th century. The Kanto Plain is the largest single area of flat land in Japan with the highest potential for agriculture and cheap expansion, and it's why today the plain is home to the largest urban area in the world, Tokyo, home to 3 out of every 10 Japanese, 38 million people concentrated into an area the size of Kuwait. All 3 of these plains are home to massive urban areas because of their flat land and location nearby to bays that allow for easy trade and transportation. And Japan has always had to rely on trade to maintain her status as a great power, because the biggest weakness in Japan's geography is maintaining her enormous population on an island that doesn't have enough resources to sustain it. Only 12% of Japan's land is arable and suitable for farming, compared with 25% of the UK's land, 34% of Germany's land, or 53% of India's land. The Japanese islands are also famously poor in natural resources, with virtually no oil reserves, natural gas, coal, or minerals. Therefore, Japan has always had to look abroad for the resources to feed her population and fuel her economy, either through trade or through conquest. Japan currently relies extremely heavily on imported foodstuffs and fossil fuels, and for a time, the government tried to offset this dependence by switching to nuclear power. In 2010, 25% of Japan's electricity came from domestic nuclear energy production, but Japan's other great geographic weakness intervened: a severe vulnerability to natural disasters. The 2011 earthquake and tsunami triggered a nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear reactor plant, and the resulting outcry and public opinion against nuclear energy led to the closure of every single nuclear power plant in the entire country by 2012. Today, only 4% of Japan's electricity comes from nuclear power, and the country is even more dependent on fossil fuel imports, and another disaster could strike again at any time. Japan is, after all, one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to natural disasters, and certainly the most vulnerable great power by a wide margin. The top two most expensive disasters in human history both took place in Japan. The previously mentioned 2011 earthquake and tsunami that caused $411 billion in damages, and the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake that caused $330 billion in damages. Japan's geographic location is, unfortunately, at the intersection of 4 different tectonic plates that are grinding and scraping past one another, which often causes huge earthquakes and devastating tsunamis. But those aren't the only disasters that Japan has to worry about. The intersection of these plates has also given the Japanese islands 108 current active volcanoes, 10% of all the active volcanoes in the world, which occasionally erupt to cause even more damage. The various natural disasters and rugged geography have made development in Japan historically difficult, but they also make any outside invasion of Japan a very difficult thing to accomplish. Throughout her entire history, Japan has never once been conquered by an outside power. And part of the reason for this is just because historically, Japan has been located pretty far away from all the other major world powers. China is located 800 kilometers away across an open ocean, and the only major time an invasion came from this direction was when the Mongols attempted to invade twice in the 13th century and failed twice from 2 different typhoons that destroyed their fleets. Natural disasters can occasionally work in Japan's favor after all, and since Japan is located so far away from the troubles of Asia and the rest of the world, they have the option at any time to pursue a policy of isolationism, which they did for over 2 centuries between 1641 and 1853, when Japan had essentially zero contact with the outside world and punished any Japanese person leaving the islands with death if they ever returned. But the lack of raw materials and farmland at home needed to supply her economy and feed her people has occasionally led Japan to pursue a very different policy of imperialism to conquer what she needs. And Korea has always been the first target. The peninsula is a logical choice for expansion because it's close to Japan's core, it can serve as a funnel for the Japanese military to push deeper into Asia from, and it's rich with natural mineral resources and arable land. A unified Japan attempted to conquer Korea once for these reasons before the isolationist period in 1592, and then again in 20th century after the end of the isolationist period. Japan's rapidly industrializing economy in the 20th century demanded things like oil, coal, steel, and of course, food, all of which Japan's geography has relatively poor amounts of. And so, Japan set about on decades of conquest and war to secure those resources. She conquered Taiwan from China, defeated Russia and conquered Korea, attacked Germany and conquered her Pacific islands, attacked China again to conquer Manchuria, and then eventually invaded all of China. It was a dangerous addiction that Japan struggled to satisfy, because every attack that Japan made resulted in even more international sanctions that restricted her ability to trade for resources and continue her war. When the US embargoed Japan in 1940 and cut off her oil supply, the Japanese military calculated that they only had 2 years left of oil in their reserves before they ran dry and couldn't continue. The need for oil placed on them by their geography and trade restrictions caused the Japanese military to commit to invading Indonesia and the Philippines, which would eventually bring in basically the entire world against them. Japan overextended themselves all across the Pacific, and with rapidly depleting reserves of oil and coal that they couldn't possibly replenish back at home, they inevitably lost against a massive coalition that they couldn't have ever hoped to defeat. But the allies of the war faced the same problem that the Mongols faced in the 13th century. Invading Japan itself really sucks. Japan planned a massive, all-out defense of their home islands that probably would have cost the Allies millions of casualties. So rather than dealing with that, the US resorted to dropping the atomic bombs, and Japan surrendered without it ever coming to that. In the aftermath, Japan lost all of her imperial conquests since her Industrial Revolution, and was once again confined to the meager resources and farmland of the Japanese home islands. Japan continues to claim the southern Kuril Islands, however, which were annexed by the Soviet Union and later Russia after the war. And because of that dispute, Russia and Japan have still to this day in 2019 never signed an official peace treaty ending the Second World War between them. The Japan of today, however, manages its geography struggle by trading for its resources rather than conquering them. Japan has since specialized in automobiles, electronics, industrial equipment, and robotics, and trades these specialized goods for the raw materials and foodstuff that she desperately needs. 84% of Japan's energy and 50% of her meat is imported from other countries, and she is the world's largest importer of natural gas, second largest coal importer, second largest agricultural importer, and third largest oil importer. It's safe to say that Japan still struggles with her geographic limitations and still deals with them by seeking out resources abroad, just in a different manner than she has in the past. Of course, the way that Japan attempted to solve her geographic limitations in the past through conquest was not justifiable. However, if you want to see a much more in-depth video explaining how and why Japan fought World War II and how her geography hurt and helped, you should check out Apocalypse: The Second World War next on CuriosityStream, a glorious 6-part documentary series that explains the full history of the Second World War through archival footage that has been painstakingly colored in so that you can see the events the same way as the people who lived through it actually did. This is just one of thousands of titles that you can watch on your desktop, smart TV, iOS, Android, Apple TV, Roku, Chromecast, and more platforms through CuriosityStream. They're the perfect site for anybody who likes being entertained and taught something at the same time. But what's even crazier is that they made their annual subscription even better by including a subscription to Nebula. Nebula is the streaming site that I and a bunch of other creators started as a place to try out new things on a platform purpose-built for educational content. All new RealLifeLore videos go up there ad-free, and there's also a bunch of original exclusive content from different creators, such as my car show. To get all of that, all you need to do is sign up for the annual plan, just $19.99 per year, at curiositystream.com/reallifelore, and then you'll get an email with a link to get your free Nebula subscription. Also, you'll be supporting all of these independent creators continue to independently create, which is pretty cool. And as always, thank you for watching.